The following is a presentation of Surprise Church. El siguiente programa es la presentación de la iglesia Surprise.
Much fun to make. We're starting a series right now called Work. And as much time as you and I devote of our lives to work, whether it's parenting work, student work, or employment, or all of the above, even if you're retired, you get up and you do stuff that you believe is necessary to maintain health, to maintain your living, to maintain your home, to maintain your relationships. There's a sense in which we do things out of obligation, out of duty, out of responsibility every day. And sometimes it's good to stop and step back and ask what we're doing and why. Sometimes it's so healthy and important to say, are we working for the right reasons? Are we doing what we do and slowly losing a sense of purpose that should be driving us, and instead operating out of a different narrative, out of a different storyline that's going to end very differently, even if it feels the same right now? Are we working for the right reasons? Let me ask you that, in your bulletin, there's a couple different things, including the Halloween insert, so a couple thoughts on how to be missional and make an impact over Halloween, but there's also another insert where you can take some notes in there. And if you want to jot down things that pick up that I might say or fill in the blank, but also thoughts that come to you as you're listening that I didn't even say, including if you got to get groceries and you remember you got to get rutabaga after church, write that down. It's a good spot for it too. But also write down why you work. What are your things that are driving you as you work? What is your motivation to do what you do, whether you're a student or an employee or retired or a stay-at-home parent? A number of things might be driving you. You might be driven by money. I just got to pay the bills. You might be driven by a lifestyle. I want to live at a certain lifestyle, and I must do this particular job or study to do this particular job in order to have that lifestyle. It might be for you more about purpose. I believe that I am called to be a male model, and therefore I must do male modeling. I'm called because I might want to work because of status. I really like the authority, the position that I have, and it makes me feel part of my value comes from it. And so I work because of the status. I may be really focused on career. I'm doing what I do now. I'm planting seeds for where I want to get down the road. And so my career goals drive me. I might be oriented towards achievement. I really feel called to make $1 million or to own my own company or to get 4.0 grade point average, whatever that achievement thing could drive you. Finally, you might be really motivated by more relational goals. I don't want to just sit at home by myself and have someone else be the breadwinner. I want to be out there. I want to be engaged in relationships with people that make me feel a joy and connectedness and all those things. And these can all be side benefits of what we do, but if they're the driving function of what we do, there's something missing. And what's missing, I think, for me is summed up in this question. Ask yourself this question. When you're thinking about why you work, I think it really helps to answer from this perspective. Who do you work for? Who are you working for? Some people say, well, as the list shows, I work for myself and my career, my goals, my achievement, my relationships. It might be more of a self-focused, not necessarily selfish, but self-focused goals. You might also say, I work for my family. In a primary sense, I try to provide for my family. So I work in order to provide for myself and my family. The thing about that, though, is ultimately, that means that you're working for your boss. That means that your boss becomes the authority that allows you to provide for yourself and your family. Your boss is either the authority or the consumer that you must go through in order to provide those benefits. That makes your boss or your customers a gatekeeper and a taskmaster to please or despise. That means that you're driven by values that are relative to who at the moment is your boss or your customer or your teacher, or your coach. If that is why you do what you do for yourself and your family in order to please this person, to work for this person, you are going to either work for them happily or not so happily, but it's going to change based on who is in that position. And if you have many different bosses, in some places you just have multiple people that you report to or multiple levels above you, or lots of different clients and customers, you're going to have to tap dance between the different interest groups trying to please and appease them, or being frustrated that it's just not possible. This is a very relative way of operating because it's focused on extrinsic motivation and extrinsic relationships. And this, what I call is being a career chameleon. Anybody have a pet chameleon? I should have brought one today and just have it sitting on my shoulder and watch it turn gray on this shirt or red on our surprise sweatshirts. They're pretty amazing animals that they can actually Somehow God has given them the ability to change color based on their context for, protection purposes. And he gave humans, for better or worse, the same ability. And unfortunately, we use it sometimes way too well, where we change color based on context, where our authority figures become the mirror that shapes us, the motivation that drives us, the impression that consumes us. How many Office fans here? The show The Office. Any of the Office fans here? There's a employee that came later on in the show, Andy Bernard, and he specialized, he said, in personality mirroring. In other words, he's going to be whoever he needs to be to make you like him. And so he actually gets a chance to kind of take a higher level role in the company. And here's what he does in order to be a chameleon to please one of his clients. Check this out.
My word.
Okay, albeit an extreme example, but sit down with an authority and just keep saying yes, and you'll feel that way. Can you come in late? Can you stay late? Can you come in early? Can you take this? Can you take that? Yes, 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 yes. Is so-and-so coming? Let me look like I'm working extra hard. And you can be consumed with this achievement for the sake of impressions that can really ruin your joy. Here's the thing. We do it because we want to be successful. But career chameleons are less respected and less successful. You saw his whole office was like, what is wrong with this guy? He is so desperate to make a good impression that he's willing to lie and do about anything, which empties you of your integrity and respect. And at the end of the day, people don't want to work with people that don't have a backbone, that don't have integrity, that are going to be a different person based on who's in the room. That's not a trustworthy person. That's a desperate person who has something that they need from you rather than something that they can offer you. And so career chameleons, though they try to do the opposite, are less respected and less successful. Now, you might say to yourself, well, good, because I don't want to be that, and I'm not that. And so sometimes we swing to the other end of the spectrum and become what I would call a career rebel, where instead of doing what I can and over-functioning to please people, I'm going to live driving my heels in the ground and kind of be a rebel. So some characters in the show, The Office, like Creed, does just about whatever he can to sabotage what's going on and undermine it, and the class clown mentality. And so he gets his joy out of being the rebel. And in order to avoid being a chameleon, I reject human authority or despise my consumers and customers. It's the same problem, but just the different end of the spectrum. Not really knowing who you're working for. And when you work for someone that you despise or work for customers that you despise, instead of trying to please them, you might simply mistreat them. This is what's behind that grumpy waiter or waitress that comes to your table. And when you say, "Are you sure there's none left?" they say, "Let me check." Nope. This is behind that TSA agent that would rather scare you than help you. This is the manager that is so short-tempered that you don't even dare go and ask for help solving an IT issue. This is the teacher that will not give you a moment of her time or his time when you don't understand an assignment. They will disdain for you because they're not doing this for the right reasons. They're rebelling against the environment that they don't feel necessarily at home in. And as a follower of Jesus, if this is you, you might do it in order to not be a chameleon, but when you do it, the scriptures say that you discredit Jesus, who came and didn't necessarily walk around with a picket sign, even when surrounded by injustice. Didn't lay down like a chameleon and just say, "Go ahead." But he also didn't live as a protest against the world. He found a way to engage for reasons other than his audience. Now, I want to take you into a passage where we see this really come out. As Jesus' church that he starts to grow, they struggle with this same problem of falling off the wagon of either being a chameleon or a rebel in the roles that we have, whether parenting, whether it's in our students' lives, or whether it's in our family lives or in our employment. They felt the same workplace problem that we do. This is an old problem that exists across cultures. And Paul's primary concern when he's writing these letters to these different churches in these ancient cities is don't discredit Jesus by how you work. By working for the wrong reasons, you discredit Jesus because you operate in one of these two unhealthy ways that makes Jesus look pretty silly. What's your spouse going to think if you say you follow Jesus but are the most defiant spouse you can possibly be? You're never going to run my life. What's your parent going to say when you start going to youth group and come home with an attitude of self-righteousness? What's your wife going to say when you start going to men's group and come home as a pompous, arrogant guy who just quotes Bible verses to justify what he wants? What's your employee going to say when you hang a Bible verse on your desk, but behind the scenes stab them in the back? You're going to discredit Jesus by being a rebel. And so Paul says, let's try to make God look good rather than bad as we operate out of our vocations. So he actually speaks to slaves. Now, slaves back then were very different than the 1700s and 1800s institution of slavery, the unjust, horrific institution of slavery in America. It was actually a kind of like indentured servitude where you could work your way out of slavery, but still there was injustice in the institution then. But the point of the scriptures was not, we're just going to tell you to be defiant slaves, or defiant employees, or defiant laborers, or defiant children once you know Jesus, because what's that going to do for the reputation of Jesus? It's going to say, just don't let anybody in your company hear about Jesus, because they're going to be turned into bad employees. So he says, slaves, servants, employees, kids, parents, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you, which the original language calls eye service. You've heard of lip service, saying whatever you need to make the right impression. This is eye service, doing whatever you need to do to get the right impression. Eye service to curry their favor. The phrase that comes from is man-pleasing. So don't do eye service for the sake of man-pleasing, but instead with sincerity of heart, or it literally reads, with an undivided heart, with your heart fully engaged in what you're doing, not parceled out between God on the one hand and your boss on the other and your clients on the other, being a different person to please the different people, or going to meet the bare minimum, but when no one's looking, slacking off. Don't just do eye service for man-pleasing, but work with your heart wholly behind what you're doing. Make sure your heart is in it with reverence for God. Colossians goes on the next verse and says, whatever you do, changing diapers or merging companies, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart. Finals week, first week of school, days off, whatever you're doing, do it with all of your heart. This phrase comes from a Greek phrase that says basically from your soul. Psyche is the soul, where we get the word psychology, psyche. Work with your soul involved. Work is not meant to be something that we have to leave our faith in the entry to do. Or we leave our ethics in the entry. We leave our values. We leave our boundaries. We leave our self-understanding of who we are in Jesus. We leave the sense that we are forgiven and freed and accepted by Jesus. And then we bring an empty vessel rather than a full one to our work, to our school, to our homes. And so he says, I want you to work with your whole heart involved, as if you're working for God and not human beings. When you work primarily for human beings, your heart gets dealt out like a deck of cards. It gets splintered, fractured, diminished, and your soul isn't involved. You're an empty vessel. If you're just doing the hard work of parenting just because your kids need you, you're going to start to feel hollow because your soul is not engaged. If you're parenting for the sake of Jesus Christ's love for you that you share now with kids who oftentimes don't deserve it or ask for it, your soul is the source of your work. So that's just one letter. Let's just see if the Bible's consistent about this, because sometimes it says one thing to a particular place and time, and then somewhere else it says something else. So now let's take a look at a letter written to the Ephesian church, the church in Ephesus, not far from the Colossae church, but this is a different group of people, slightly different time, different context, but same problem. Slaves, servants, employees, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Treat your boss like he's Jesus. Treat your customers like they're Jesus, but they're not. Obey them not for man-pleasing, not for people-pleasing when their eye is on you. That's eye service. Again, same exact words. But as servants, as slaves of Jesus, doing the will of God from your heart again. There's that psyche, your soul getting involved. Serve wholeheartedly from your psyche, as if you were serving the Lord, not people. Well, the obvious thing is, well, I am serving people. I am an employee. He is my boss. She is my manager. But don't do it for them, Paul says. Don't show up on time only if your boss is watching. Don't fudge the numbers when you can get away with it. Don't slack off in practice when the coach goes to the can. Be there with your whole heart, because the one who watches 24/7 is there, and he wants your soul engaged. Here's the thing, working for God keeps my heart whole. I don't lose my reason for being the moment I punch in. I don't lose my God-given joy the moment the clock starts running, the kids get up, class starts. Working for God keeps my heart whole, and it engages my soul, where otherwise I would be empty, outward, and hollow. Now you might say, well, gosh, I'm not going to be successful. That's not true. When you focus on serving God as you're at your place of work or in your schooling, you will exceed expectations in most cases. I will exceed expectations if I'm not just dusting only where the homeowners can see the dust and not behind the pictures, and vacuuming not under the rugs and under the beds, but only when they can see it. You're going to exceed expectations because you're not working for your boss. You're not performing for your clients. Your work is an act of worship. Your soul's involved. You're not dealing your heart out like a deck of cards. This is who you are in Jesus, called to this place and this time for his reasons. They may have hired you for some reasons. You may have accepted the position for other reasons, but primarily you're doing this for him. Here's the thing, and when you do that, you're going to exceed expectations and know when to say no. You're not going to be a chameleon, just doing whatever they say, whatever someone wants, whatever someone demands. The lists of demands are going to be endless. You're going to be able to say, you know that my heart is in this job, sir, madam, but I cannot give another night this week. I cannot work overtime anymore. I cannot accept that position or that responsibility because I believe that it's going to prevent me from serving the primary callings I have in life. I am going to put my heart in my work, but I can't go there. Working for God, you will exceed expectations, and yet you will know how to say no because you're listening to him and not all the other voices that tell you what to do. This cascades right into family. The chapter in Ephesians 5, wives, submit to your husbands. Should get that bumper sticker on all our guys' cars, no. Submit to your husbands. It actually tells guys to do the same thing, though. Submit to your husbands as you do to the Lord. Treat your husband like he's Jesus, and he's not. Don't just give your husband what he deserves. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Give yourselves up for your wives just like Jesus did for the church, who didn't deserve it, didn't earn it. Don't wait till she deserves it. Because at the end of the day, you're not doing it for him and you're not doing it for her. You're doing it for Jesus because he did it for you. And he's the animating, guiding force in your life and in your work. Gary Smalley often says this. He says, in marriage and work and parenting, do not do it for the person. Do it for the Jesus over their shoulder. So when you look into your boss's face, and you could swear that there's fangs in there. They don't even need to buy a Halloween costume. It's just, when you look at that employee that you hired, and they look like a teenager most days, just barely even got their pants pulled up above their butt, just looking to do the bare minimum, and you're just like, oh. When you think about your clients and customers and all the different demands, you can say, okay, I am not here for you. I am here for him. I'm going to look at him over your shoulder and say, how can I best love you? Serve this person so that I'm serving Jesus. And where do I need to draw lines? Where do I need to say yes for the Jesus over your shoulder? Where do I need to say no for the Jesus over your shoulder? That if I didn't see him there, if I was just working to please you, to honor you, to get a promotion for myself, I would do it differently. But if I see him over your shoulder, if I know that he is in this, that I'm in this for him, that my soul is engaged and not parceling out my heart, where am I going to say no and draw boundaries that I need for my own sanity, for my family, for my health? And if you're not able to do that, you are going to cross one ethical line after another. You are going to cross one moral line after another. You are going to begin successive stages of depleting your family life because you are not guided by God. He's not your boss. And so everyone's your boss. Who are you working for? When you think about Jesus dying on the cross, who did you think he worked for? Man, he heard a lot of voices. He heard so many competing demands. He heard so many requests and please, please do this for me, please do this for me. But he wasn't a chameleon. And he wasn't a rebel. Revolutionary, you betcha, but he didn't just rebel for the sake of rebelling. He would not have died for you, and he would not have died for me if he were one of those two things. Instead, look at the prayer he prayed the night before he was executed, the night before he was butchered. He knew what was coming, and here's what he said to his dad in prayer. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup of suffering be taken from me, yet not what I want, not what they want, what you want. Because what I want is not to have nails pounded through my body and drown in my own lung fluid. What I want is not to give those mean authorities what they want. What I want is not to just please the crowd who wants me to defeat them and destroy them. What I want is what you want. And if I don't do what you want and I only do what I want or they want, this whole thing is going to be a mess. It's true for the Son of God, so it's true for you. You know what, at the end of the day, what he offers, I'm going to invite the band back up. What Jesus offers us is the same thing that allowed him to stand there amidst the firestorm of expectations and ambitions that surrounded him and blew against him and pounded against him from one side or another. What he offers you is the same thing that allowed him to endure. He offers you a whole heart. His whole heart for you so that yours can be whole in what you do. Imagine your office or workplace. If everybody showed up there and did what was right, no matter who was watching, that operated with complete integrity because they all worked for Jesus and not for themselves or their bosses or their customers. Imagine how your home would work if everybody saw Jesus over one another's shoulders and operated for him out of obedience and love for him rather than the varying bar of expectations that others have or this desire to just keep the peace and make people happy. Wouldn't it be great if your heart could feel so whole that you just could pour yourself out in those environments for him, that you could just say, I know when I need to say when for him, that you could say yes for him, that you could say no for him, that you could go to bed at night with your integrity. Stand as we close here. I want to just encourage you to go today whole. I want to challenge you to leave this place from your soul. Put your heart and your soul into your work. Even if you're retired, don't just think, where am I golfing today? Where am I going on vacation? Ask the Lord where he wants you to live and serve and how, because this is not about us at the end of the day. It's about him keeping us whole by us living for him. He is the only boss that is not going to be a cruel and vicious master. He's the only authority that is able to know what's best for us. So just as we say to our kids, trust me, I know what's best, God says to you, I know what's best. If you live for the audience of many, it's going to kill you. You're going to fracture and dissect and bisect and rip apart the very essence of your soul. You're going to be hollow. You're going to be lifeless. You're going to go through the motions. It's going to erode your joy. But if you do this thing called life for me, I know what's best for you. If you parent for me, if you marry for me, if you work for me, if you study for me, you're going to know how to do it and not lose your soul. It'll be an act of gratitude for my love for you, not an act of desperation to try to create some destiny that I have already created for you. You're going to allow you to save yourself, not lose yourself. And that is what he wants for you. During this last psalm, I want to just invite you at some point, at any point during the song, if you so feel moved, just put that one finger up there to make a promise, a declaration to you and the people around you that you want to live no longer for the audience of many, but you want to live for the audience of one who loved you and gave his whole heart for you. Jesus, let us live for the audience of one. Amen. We're going to have a soft dismissal after this song. If you'd like to come up for prayer or communion, please do so. Otherwise, we're after noon. Go home and start living for one. God bless you guys. Let's sing.